Hello and welcome back to Doubles and Trebles. It's been a long time, too long actually, but we've got two of us here today. You may notice Adam Smith can't be with us, unfortunately. He's a little bit under the weather and actually has work to do, which is a real revelation. So Adam isn't going to join us, but I am joined by Ozzy Smith, and we're here to preview the Masters, which starts this Friday, the 28th of January 2022. Three-day event, as we know, with the world's top 24 players. Really looking forward to darts coming back on our TV screens. It'll be the first PDC action we've seen, barring Q School, since the World Championship final on the 3rd of January. So, yeah, a nice little 3 or 4 week break is about to end for us. Just to run over the Masters format, so we've got the top 24 players in the world rankings taking part in this tournament. We've had a couple of withdrawals. Danny Noppert is not there. I think he's expecting the birth of his first child, or they may well have had it, not sure on that. But Noppert won't be playing. He's been replaced by Simon Whitlock. And we've also lost Nathan Aspinall, unfortunately, the Asp, suffering with an injury at the World Championship. And, he's decided to withdraw. Looks like that could be a niggling problem for the months to come. Hopefully he can get that right. And he's going to be replaced by Devon Peterson. So, other than that, we've got the top 24 players. 16 of them coming in at round 1 and the top 8 coming in at round 2. And we'll just whittle down straight knockout into first round, second round, quarters, semis, and a final. It's a legs format, 11 legs for the first round, first to 6, first to 10 through to the second and quarterfinals, and then best of 21 for the semis and the final. So, Oz, great to have you on. Before we go into the tournament itself, just a word on those replacements for Noppert and Aspinall. Devon Peterson, Simon Whitlock, probably players you wouldn't pick on the form book. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And if it was solely down to selecting these players, neither of them would be picked. They're fortunate that, the rankings haven't really adjusted yet, and they're in positions from where they have dropped in. But in reality, it's two players that undeserving may seem harsh, because, you've still got to be a good player to be in the top 30 in the world in the PDC. However, I actually think there's better form players below them who would be more deserving of an opportunity in this instance. That saying, I don't expect them to rip up the rule book, and it is just easier to drop down, in the rankings. So, there's no favouritism or something like that. So, yeah, Whitlock and Peterson both have poor World Championships, but they've got a chance to bounce back now, and they can go in somewhat pressure-free, really, because this is, from a ranking perspective, this is money they've got guaranteed, they've got locked in, and they were going into the first major event of the year at zero. I think they've got a minimum of about $2.5 now, something like that, even if they go out in the first round. So some positives. So yeah, they can play risk-free darts, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely, I'd agree with that. I mean, I see a lot of reaction on social media about why aren't we getting the likes of Callum Ridds in the tournament and Chris Dobey, players like that. But I think we have to realise that the rankings are there for a reason. They're done that way for a reason over a 2-year period. And while the likes of, Whitlock and Peterson, they could potentially drop out of this top 24 soon because of their recent underperformance. This is kind of a lifeline for them, as you say, that maybe if they have a good run here, that money could prove important. It is a non-ranking event, of course, but can spur you on for the rest of the campaign, a good run here, as we saw with Jonny Clayton, last year's winner. And I thought just before we run through the tournament, we could take a look back at last year, where Jonny Clayton, one of the last men to qualify for this after his exploits at the World Championship, losing to Joe Cullen in a classic game, and he got in the Masters. He was one of the outsiders. We put him up here on this channel for a good run, and sure enough, the Ferret delivered for us, beating Milton Keynes in the final. And just as we're saying it can be a springboard, it really was for Jonny Clayton last year. I was beating Milton Keynes, getting in the Premier League, and we all know what happened in the rest of the year. So an important tournament.
Absolutely. I forgot it wasn't a ranking event, actually. So yeah, on me that. But for Jonny Clayton, I mean, what a final it was as well. And, what a tournament. I think Milton Keynes was probably the surprise of the tournament, actually. I think he demolished James Wade. What did he have, an average of something like 116 in the semi-final? Just would have beaten anybody on his day. But Jonny Clayton, it somewhat set him up for the year, really, didn't it? Because he played some phenomenal stuff in this tournament, and he's just never looked back since. So whilst it isn't a ranking event, it can set you up for the year. And a good run. Winning breeds confidence, doesn't it? We said, I was openly criticised Peter Wright, earlier back end of last year. He didn't look good, but what did he do? He kept on winning, and he was excellent at the World Championships, probably turned it on the best he had. Prior to that, he was always a bit hit and miss. So it just shows that regardless of the event, winning breeds confidence, and if you can get a good run here, it can set you up for later down the line.
Yeah, definitely echo those comments. So just to dive into the tournament, and firstly, we'll just have a quick rundown of the odds. Obviously, small field, so we can run through it kind of match by match quite quickly. But firstly, the outright odds. Gerwyn price, perhaps unsurprisingly, in there at a 4-1 general favourite. Not far behind him is Michael van Gerwen. There is a 9-2 there, but they're generally 4-1 the pair. Peter Wright, world champion, in there at 5-1. Some people will see that as value given the way he played at the Ali Pali, perhaps. But there we are. Jonny Clayton in at 7-1 behind them. Then Michael Smith, world championship runner-up, is 9-1. And then we have a huge jump to the rest of the field with Gary Anderson, 22, Dimitri Vandenberg and Rob Cross at 25, Jose and James Wade in at 28, and it's 40s, bar the rest. So, yeah, an interesting setup in this market, us, really. We've got the three big hitters, Price, MVG and Wright. Jonny Clayton and Michael Smith just hot on their heels, and then a huge gap to the rest. Do you think that's fair? Do you think there should be anyone that should be a bit closer to those top five? Or?
Well, I think Gary Anderson, for the way he played again, Anderson, he seems to turn it on at the Worlds, and he was excellent again. He does have a potential quarter-final meeting with Michael van Gerwen. Plus, as well, he has to get. He'll be taking on the winner of Joe Cullen and Darrell Gurney, which isn't an easy tie. I think Michael Smith's good value. Smith played. He was arguably the player of the tournament. I know he didn't win it at the Worlds, but consistency. And he didn't play badly in the final either. Peter Wright was just on another level. And I think at 9-1 there, he's not got a bad draw. He's only going to meet, the likes of a potential Gerwyn, Price or Jonny Clayton in the semi-final. He's got the winner of Gabe Clemens, Christoph Ratajski, and then the winner of Wade and the winner of Bunting or Chisnell. So it's a pretty favourable draw there for Michael Smith. I think everybody else, I think the odds are pretty fair, actually. I'm just pulling him up now. I mean, Vandenberg, went exited in a shock first round exit. There's no one really else. I think I like the look of Rob Cross. I thought Cross played well in the Worlds. Somebody who I tipped up and thought he could have a deep run. I think it was the quarterfinals he exited at, but didn't play badly. You didn't look back and think, oh, he had an absolute stinker. He did miss chances, and he probably turned it on a touch too late. So, but I think it's more difficult here. Again, he's going to have to. I think he'll beat Brendan Dolan. I think he'll beat Jose de Souza. But then realistically, you're going to run into Peter Wright in a quarterfinal, which is winnable because Peter Wright, I know we've criticised him, but it depends what Peter Wright turns up.
No, it really does.
And when he's bad, he's bad. He can be all over the place. He starts changing darts. But then, like I said, he's in arguably the richest vein and form of his life at the moment. So if I was to pick an outsider, I'd probably look at somebody like Rob Cross. But then again, not trying to be, beat the bookie, but I think Michael Smith's value. But then can you disagree with the top five or top four, excluding Smith? No. And obviously MVG, he's had a long rest, didn't compete in that World. So, and he was in some excellent form as well, coming into the Worlds before he had to withdraw through COVID. So it's going to make for an interesting tournament. We're going to see a couple of players that we've not seen for a while.
Definitely. I think I echo a lot of your thoughts there. MVG's a very interesting runner, having to withdraw from that World Championship in the way that he had to as well. And while you can't knock the likes of Gerwyn, Price at the top of the market, you can certainly make a case for those behind him with Peter Wright coming off the back of a World Championship win, Michael Smith coming off the back of his World Championship runner-up, and Jonny Clayton, the forgotten man for me in this tournament, won it last year, 3 TV titles, and went out of the World Championships averaging 103 to Michael Smith in one of the greatest games you'll see. So he's done very little wrong either, yet his price has drifted out a couple of points. But we'll dive into it then, because we have 8 first-round matches, and then we can look at the winner, who the winner will play as well. So that's probably the best way of going at it. So in the top quarter, if you will, we have Ryan Searle taking on the King, Mervyn King, and the winner of that game will play Gerwyn Price. And we then have Dimitri Vandenberg versus Ian White, with the winner playing Jonny Clayton. And again, as we've got Price and Clayton in the same little mini section, which is a bit of a shame. But first, starting with the first round game, Searle versus King, how do we see that one going?
Difficult draw for Mervyn, really. And likewise, Ryan Searle as well. King isn't somebody that you'd ever look forward to playing. But I'd say of the form players, I'd say Searle is that. I know King did quite well in the Worlds, but I don't think he ever, I think it was in the game he got beat, I don't think he ever looked comfortable.
James Wade.
Against James Wade. He was, I know he got to a quarter final, which is an excellent achievement, but he never got going. He was, he said after, prior to it that he didn't feel his throw was all there. He wasn't as fluid. And I think that's what Mervyn needs to be, fluid. And when he is, he can beat anybody. I think this tournament's probably just come a bit, too soon. He isn't getting any younger. He complained about the schedule quite a bit, saying it's quite busy. Whereas Ryan Searle, he's getting better and better each time he plays. He's a quality player. Again, probably in somewhat of a false position. Top 16, I think he'll break into probably the top 10 fairly soon. He's, a horrible person to play because he's very, very good. And again, there was no shame in the way he went out to Peter Wright, and he didn't play badly either. It's not as if he turned in a bad average. So I'm going to side with Ryan Searle in this one. It's a shootout format, but I think Searle's consistency will ultimately see him beat Mervyn King.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, to be honest. Obviously, a big fan of Merv, but Searle, and this first to 6 legs format suits someone like Searle, who has played and done extremely well on the Pro Tour. So we know that these, best of 11 matches are right up his alley. I think Searle can beat King, and I think he can give Gerwyn Price a really tough examination over 19 legs. So that'll be a really interesting one to watch. I'll maybe just take the next match, which is Dimitri Vandenberg and Ian White. Not exactly a classic compared to some of the other games, but Dimitri will be very disappointed with his World Championship exit. Let's be honest, he didn't play too badly. Florian Hempel, superb in that match, averaging around a ton. Vandenberg was very slow out the traps, then came back with a blistering second set where he averaged, north of 110. And it looked like he was just going to railroad the underdog, but he held himself together really well, Hempel. And I think we'll see Hempel, pushing into that, towards that top 32 this year if he repeats those kind of performances semi-regularly. So not a shameful defeat for Dimitri, but he will have been disappointed because he has had good World Championship runs in the past. He has looked like a potential contender. He was 5th or 6th in the betting market. So a very disappointing World Champs for him. Perfect opportunity to bounce back here against Ian White, who Ian White didn't have too bad a World Championships himself, but he really chucked that game against Gary Anderson. Not sure if you remember the match, but he was 3-0 up and cruising Diamond, and it was a complete combustion. Unfortunately, he missed a few match starts. Anderson did lift it, but it really was a case of White losing it, unfortunately. And that is kind of the story of his career on the TV, I'm afraid. And while we all know he can beat Dimitri Vandenberg over 11 legs, you'd have to favour Vandenberg. I think Vandenberg, if he goes into his second round match with Jonny Clayton with a bit of a free hit mentality, he can beat him. These are two quite evenly matched players at their best, but Jonny Clayton just arguably the more consistent over the last 6 to 12 months. So that's the key difference there. I think Clayton probably has too much for him over 19 legs, but I expect that to be a very close game. And just before we move on from this little section, I've got to ask you, because we've got Gerwyn Price in there, is an odds-on favourite to win the quarter. Jonny Clayton 2-1, Dimitri Vandenberg 7s, and Searle 11. Where would you be going if you were going to have an interest there? Do you think you go the value with Searle, or do you think solid favourites?
Look, Searle's priced it the way he is because he's got to win that extra game, really, and he's got to come through Gerwyn Price. But I don't know, in these shorter formats, I mean, it's not like set format, where you can chuck a set away because you've got time to come back. If you lose 3 or 4 legs, you're struggling. You're really struggling. And Searle's got that. Searle can beat anybody, by the way. He's not just this, just burst onto the scene. He's a well-respected player. I'm surprised he's so big, actually, for the quarter. It's not an easy quarter, don't get me wrong. And you are going to have to beat, realistically, probably Gerwyn, Price and Jonny Clayton. Struggling to back Price at odds on. I think Clayton, just over 2-1, is probably a bet. It's probably not the right phrase, but I'd happily take that. Like we said, he didn't play badly in the Worlds either. Going out averaging over 100, it's unfortunate. You'll win more games than you'll lose averaging that as well. So I think Searle would be worth a punt. I think just given what he's got to go through. But if I was to pick anybody just purely on price, it would be Jonny Clayton at 2-1.
Yeah, no need for me to expand on that. Totally agree. I think Jonny Clayton is probably the sensible selection, and Ryan Searle's certainly worth a look for value hunters because, as you quite rightly say, he can beat anyone on his day. So if we move on to the second quarter, then we've got Dave Chisnell versus Stephen Bunting, and the winner will play James Wade, World Championship semi-finalists, of course. But Wade, there was a few question marks over the quality of his performances, certainly in terms of averages at that World Championship, and whether he was a bit of a fortunate semi-finalist. But and then the other game in this section, Christoph Ratajski versus Gabriel Clemens, is a very interesting match, and the winner will play Michael Smith. So this is an interesting little mini section. Just before we go on to it, I will just give you the prices for it. Michael Smith is an even money favourite for this section, which is very much a result of his World Championship run. Because I think if you ran this section a few months ago, James Wade would probably have been the favourite here, but Wade now an 11-4 second favourite, so quite a big disparity between those two. Then we're going to Ratajski and Chisnell, both at 15-2, and Bunting and Clemens both at 14-1. So, Oz, I can maybe hand you the first game of this quarter to have a chat about. So, Chisnell and Bunting, I think in these type of tournaments, people look at who would play James Wade and think that's quite a winnable section. I've certainly been guilty of it in the past. Do you think we sometimes underestimate James Wade's ability to just win matches like this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think he cares about, the sexy averages and big finishes. He just grinds out results. Let's have it right. He won his quarterfinal against Merv King 5-0, and he didn't really get out of first or second gear. That's because, he took out the scores he needed to at the right times. He's a very difficult player to beat, and he's a player that has consistently been probably in the top 15, probably top 10 for well over a decade now. Perhaps somewhat, not underachieved, but, never been in a World's final, that sort of stuff, but not many people do that. So, yeah, I think we're all guilty of that because he doesn't, have that, hits, comes close to 9 darters. He's not a heavy 180 hitter. He's just a bit of a steady Eddie, but he's ranked 4 in the world for a reason. And I think the quarterfinal is I think this is one of the easier quarters to predict. I think we see a Wade-Smith final. Chisnell Bunting isn't a classic. I think Stephen Bunting was poor at the Worlds. I thought Ross Smith deservedly beat him, and if it wasn't for Smith missing doubles, Bunting could have easily lost more convincingly than the 3-2 it was. Chisnell, unfortunate, had to withdraw through COVID, but was playing quite well. So I think Chisnell will beat Bunting, but I think he'll fall short against James Wade. But in a shootout format, Chizzy isn't somebody you want to play, because if he does turn it on, he can be a difficult guy to beat. And I think his finishing does need to be on point, because as we saw at the Worlds, Wade's finishing was on point, and I think that's why he was able to get to the semi-final.
Yeah, Chisnell and Bunting is an interesting game. Both heavy scorers, and as you say, it's such a quick-fire format. It's quite hard to call. I'd probably just about lean towards Chisnell for the reasons you gave there. Normally, I would take Bunting in this head-to-head, but I think Chisnell showed a little bit at the Worlds, and I think he could maybe, have a little bit of a run in him here. But then we talk about this, he meets Wade, and does he get past Wade? Realistically, most of the time he probably doesn't. And maybe I'm just overcomplicating it, looking for value. Maybe Wade will just do a job on the winner of that match. But if we look at the other game, and this is an interesting one, Ratajski and Clemens. At different points, if we rewound the clock 6 or 9 months back, we'd be salivating about this game. Two like heavy hitters who are capable of deep runs in tournaments. And now it's probably a sign of how their last 6 months has gone that we're not that excited about this game, which is a shame, really, because they're two fantastic players on their day. Ratajski was having a fantastic time of things until the last 2 or 3 months. Obviously, an early exit at the Ali Pali. The signs had been there before, and that, as flagged by Smido on a couple of our videos, he was keen to take on Ratajski, and he was proved right there. And Clemens, well, he'll have been a bit frustrated with his year. He did reach a floor final and stuff like that, but it hasn't really kicked on the TV just yet. Obviously, had that disappointing Grand Slam exit to Fallon Sherrick when he played ever so well, but kind of that got lost in the drama of Sherrick's impressive victory, it must be said. But yeah, difficult one to call. I suppose you'd have to say that most of the time Ratajski probably edges this encounter just through his sheer relentlessness of 140s and clutch finishing. But I wouldn't like to be confidently predicting that game. And I think Michael Smith will be a worthy favourite against whoever he plays. But let's just remember that if you take this World Championship run away from Michael Smith, then Ratajski would arguably be favourite to beat him in a contest 6 months ago. So we are very much talking about a recency bias with Michael Smith. Is that with good reason? I hope so. I hope he can carry this form on and kick on and have a good 2022. But question marks are there, and we have seen Michael Smith come off the back of good World Championship runs and then have a flat year. So let's hope he can really kick on this time. And in terms of the quarter, if it is to be Smith and Wade, I think that game suits Michael Smith perfectly. I've been more worried about Michael Smith in his first game than I would against James Wade, because I think, quite frankly, he won't panic against James Wade. He'll back himself to outscore him over 10 legs. His finishing was very good at the World Championship, and on all recent evidence, Michael Smith will do a job on James Wade just as he did at the Ali Pali. So, Oz, where would you be looking for this quarter? I'm guessing Michael Smith's a fairly solid favourite for you.
Yeah, and I'd actually take evens.
Yeah.
That wouldn't bother me at all. I'd happily take even money on that. Impressive more than anything. So yeah, I'd certainly take even money.
Yeah. I think I agree that it is probably the safest pick. I think just because of my reservations with Michael Smith's ability to reproduce, I think the 15-2 on Ratajski is big, just because of how solid he is. And we know that he can get to the quarterfinal areas of tournaments, if not much further beyond that. But yeah, I don't know. Michael Smith, maybe I'm overcomplicating it. I'd probably look at Ratajski for a little bit of value, but couldn't argue with you at all there. I think we'll move it on. 2 quarters down, 2 to go. This is an interesting game because Simon Whitlock, one of the alternatives that got in, plays Dirk van Duijvenbode, who has generally looked pretty out of form in the last 6 to 12 months. Winner of that plays Peter Wright, so you could very easily argue that Peter Wright's had a kind draw in that sense. And the second game in this quarter is Rob Cross plays Brendan Dolan, with the winner playing Jose de Souza. Jose, of course, not being himself either for the last 6 to 9 months, I would say. So a lot of question marks in this section of the draw. Rob Cross, as we've touched on, a potential dark horse in this tournament, but you've got to say it looks good for Peter Wright in this section also, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. A favourable draw is probably the best way to describe it for Peter Wright in terms of the section he's in. Van Duijvenbode and Whitlock is, just a battle of out of form players. I mean, I know Dirk, he scrambled through, didn't he? I mean, I think he beat Ross Smith, didn't he, Van Duijvenbode? And undeservedly, Smith just bottled it. Had Smith maintained any sort of form, Van Duijvenbode would have been going home. I think he was fortunate to get through, to the 4th round, and it was no shocks the way Gerwyn Price just steamrolled him. Whitlock, convincingly beaten by Martin Claymaker. Again, fortunate to be in this, but let's be right. This is a winnable game for him.
Very.
The form Van Duijvenbode is in, if Whitlock can turn it on like we know he can, this is a winnable game. And in a short format, he's live. That saying, I think they both fall short and get, convincingly beaten by Peter Wright in the next round. And just jumping on to Rob Cross, Brendan Dolan in the second game, I think Rob Cross beats Brendan Dolan. I think Rob Cross, I've said it before, is looking more like Rob Cross of old when he won the Worlds. He did have a big dip in form, actually. And, it looked like how has he won this tournament? Because the form had just completely deserted him. He went away, lost weight, actually. How we all feel about dart players losing weight. It doesn't always work out.
Yeah, terrible.
But it did benefit Rob Cross. And he's bounced back. He won the European title. He had a fairly solid run at the Worlds. And he's a difficult player to beat now. So I think he beats Brendan Dolan. And I think he comfortably comes through Jose de Sousa as well, who is a man who's not in the best of form either. As you said, the last 6 months have just... After the first 6 months, you'd have been saying, Jose's there, but he wasn't. I think Cross will come through his first and second round games. And then, depending on the way they play, I expect a Wright Cross quarter-final. And we all know about Snake. He's coming off a Worlds win. But let's see what form he does turn up in. But I would side with Wright for the quarter. It'd be stupid not to, really.
Yeah, it does certainly look like we're... I agree with what you say about Dirk versus Whitlock. Whitlock, a 6-4 outsider in that match. I would happily get involved with Whitlock there because Dirk, Whitlock is far from his best, but we know what Whitlock will do. He'll turn up, he'll average somewhere between sort of high 80s and high 90s. Could be anywhere in that 10-point band. Dirk, when he's not on, can really go to pot. And he plays in sort of flashes, which is what we saw against Ross Smith, where he was caught completely blown off the board for the first 3 sets of that match. And then Ross Smith let him back in. And then we did start to see a little bit of Dirk's better form. But generally in the last few months, Dirk has been outclassed every time he's come up against a solid operator. It's not the same Dirk that we were dealing with a few months ago. I know Smido still thinks that Dirk is going to have a big win in him somewhere along the line. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I do think he has to get back to that phase of his career. He has to refine that form, and maybe this will be where he refines it. Certainly a nice starter match for him, but I think Whitlock a worthy interest as the outsider in that game. And Cross and Dolan. Yeah, Brendan Dolan had a fantastic year on the tour last year and was unlucky to bump into Callan Ridds in such fantastic form. Was at the Ali Pali for that one, and Ridds was really excellent in that game, one of the performances of the round. But yeah, you just couldn't put him up against Cross because of the way Cross has been playing. We all fancied Cross for a big world championship. He kind of delivered. He was a bit unlucky not to go a little bit further, to be honest, but no shame in his performances. I think he beats Dolan and I think he beats Jose. And for that reason, I would take Cross for the quarter. I think Wright is a worthy favourite, but I do think that this short format, Cross's form, makes him appealing at the prices. He is around 5-1, which makes more appeal for me than the 5-6 about Wright. Wright, obviously the likeliest winner, but if we get to a Cross-Wright situation, which I think we will, then, I'd rather have the 5s on Cross, just because I think he will get to that quarter-final, so I think he's worth a go. Slightly worried I might be discounting Jose de Sousa too lightly, but I think that's more maybe an afterthought of what he can do at his best. He hasn't been at his best for quite a while, and until we see evidence that he is back towards his best, I think he is best. Opposed Jose, unfortunately. So, we're on similar thinking for that quarter. I'm just edging with Cross for the value. Final quarter then. We have another alternate. Devon Peterson comes up against Luke Humphries. This would have been Nathan Aspinall versus Luke Humphries, which I thought was the game of the first round if they're both fit and firing. As it is, looks like a fairly straightforward affair for Luke Humphries on form. Winner of that plays Michael van Gerwen, who we last saw at the Worlds winning, but not winning the Worlds. He had to withdraw through COVID, so that was very unfortunate for him. Other mini section of this draw, this is possibly the best part of the draw, actually. Joe Cullen plays Daryl Gurney. We saw Daryl Gurney back towards his best form in the last few months of 2021. He takes on Joe Cullen, who would have been disappointed to go out to Claymaker. Looked like he'd done the hard bit in coming back in that game by getting it to a final set, and then Claymaker just turned it on for a couple of legs and moved away from Cullen. Winner of that plays Gary Anderson, who, of course, was so good at the World Championships. Vintage Gary Anderson got towards the semi-finals and was a bit unlucky not to go on a great game with Peter Wright. So Oz, a tough quarter to predict. But I think we can safely say Luke Humphries should have too much for Devon Peterson, correct?
Comfortably, absolutely. I thought Peterson was awful at the Worlds, absolutely appalling, and Luke Humphries wasn't. Good player, Luke Humphries. Probably better than number 19 in the world, to be honest. Always seems to perform in the bigger tournaments, without a doubt. Just a good, solid player, and one without a doubt who's got a very bright future. Peterson, after, arguably, I think it was probably about 12, 18 months ago, career best year from where I think he was pushing, I think he broke into the top 16 actually, has just fallen away and has done nothing. All form has deserted him. He might get the odd win on the floor here and there, but what does that equate to? Not a lot, really. I think he's defending a lot of money as well. I know this isn't in that, but this is a big year for him, so he needs to turn it on. But I don't think he will do against Luke Humphries. I know he's got a free ride, but in reality, I just don't think he's going to have any sort of form to beat Luke Humphries. And then the final game of the round, Joe Cullen, Daryl Gurney. Looking forward to it, actually. Looking forward. I like Cullen. I think he's one that, always, underperforms of sorts because he's got so much ability. He just goes off the boil randomly in games at times, and it does cost him. I think the Gurney cross game was excellent in the Worlds, and Cullen should have beaten Claymaker. Simple as that, and he did go off the boil. But I'd say that two players are in reasonable form without a doubt. I think we can excuse Cullen somewhat. I know he had a really rough year last year personally. Yeah. I think he had a bereavement in his family, and he admitted he just wasn't training. He was just turning up to be there. Seems to have bounced back now, and I think this could be, probably game of the round without a doubt, as you said. Game of the round. Exciting. If I had to pick one, I'd probably, but with no confidence, go with Cullen. That's just because I think it's a genuine 50-50. And then going into the second round, Humphries Van Gerwen's a cracker. That's a real cracker. Do you know what? Luke Humphries can win that as well. He is good enough to win that. And as for Cullen Anderson's beatable. He showed excellent form at the Worlds, but we all know he's beatable. Again, two really good potential second round ties, and arguably the most difficult section of the draw to pick. An outright winner from the quarters, really difficult, but quality all throughout.
Yeah, I totally echo you again there. I think this is a really good quarter. I think 5 of the 6 runners can win it. Sorry, Devon Peterson, you're the one that I don't include in that. Prove me wrong. But, on recent form, you have to give all 5 of them a chance. I think over the last 12 months, they've all shown the ability to go and do damage in a TV tournament. And I don't know where I'm leaning with this, to be honest. Originally, I thought Luke Humphries was massive value in the quarter and in the outright. Then I've just got this nagging voice in the back of my head saying that he's going to be the first player to play Michael van Gerwen since he was forced to pull out of the World Championships. And that is not a nice position for anyone, because an angry MVG who's been waiting for this chance to get back on TV and remind everyone that he is the best player in the world, in his opinion. It's going to be a tough game for Luke Humphries. I think he's up to it. I think the short format gives him a chance. We saw him thrive in a legs format at the UK Open, where he made the final last year, losing to James Webb, and he beat Van Gerwen in that run. So he has got it in the locker, definitely. And I think in terms of the outright, if you were looking for a value runner that could do damage, Luke Humphries, still a 50-1 around for Luke Humphries. That is, you could do a lot worse than that. However, he's going to have to be at his very best to beat Van Gerwen. The outsider of the 5, Daryl Gurney, 14-1. I think on the World Championship form, you could make a real case for Daryl Gurney. Like you say, that Joe Cullen game is a 50-50 coin toss. Gurney's been made a narrow outsider in the market. I expect that to tighten up as we get closer to the game, because I do think it's a bit of a pick-em. And then, beyond that, Gary Anderson is opposable because it's not the Ali Pali. And we've seen over the last couple of years that Anderson saves his best for the Ali Pali. His Masters record in recent years, nothing to write home about. So I think you could make a case for Gurney there as well. Humphries is half the price. He's got to play Van Gerwen. So in a really strange way, I think Gurney is probably the value in the quarter betting. But I think if you're looking for an outright pick who could just put it all together, then Luke Humphries 50-1 is worth a look. He will need a bit of luck, but what 50-1 shot doesn't need a bit of luck? And I know Smido's keen on Luke Humphries as well, so I will just put that out there. I think he's fancying Cross and Humphries. And that just does lead us on to rounding things up. So, Oz, if you were going to pick one strong fancy and one value selection, who would there be in the outright market, please?
I think it's hard to oppose. Jonny Clayton, 7-1. He didn't perform badly, and he is Mr. Consistent. So I think it's 7-1 for a guy that has performed year round. He's not just turned on a bit of form at the back end of the year. Consistently for 2021, he was the best player in the world. The only thing that doesn't say that is a ranking. So I think I'd happily take on Jonny Clayton at that. He's only going to meet to be the best, you've got to beat the best, and he can do that. As an outsider, I like the Luke Humphries pick. Of course, you've got to have a bit of luck on your side, but he is good enough. And these short formats, these shootouts, he can do that because he can keep up with the best in terms of scoring, and he can take out the big finishes. But sometimes he does miss key darts, but what player doesn't? So I think Humphries, I think we've all said we quite like him, and he's a serious player. He's another one who's benefited from the weight loss as well. Actually, Pieman, he's lost a hell of a lot of weight.
He has.
So I think I'd say they're my two picks. I don't want to try and get too clever. I know I like the Rob Cross selection as well, but I think Humphries is the better value personally. Yeah. So yeah, Jonny Clayton, Luke Humphries.
Well, you made my life easy because I agree with you, to be honest. Jonny Clayton, 7-1. Don't try and overcomplicate things. This is the... if we're having a round robin between Gerwyn, Price, MVG, Wright and Jonny Clayton would win just as many as everyone else, if not more. So why would you go with Price at 7-2 over Clayton at double the price, 7-1? No idea, to be honest. Jonny Clayton's beat Gezi Price just as much as the other way around. I think if they met in the World Championships, Jonny Clayton would have beaten Gerwyn Price on form. So I have no idea why they've put Gerwyn Price in at half the price, other than his name and his stature. Gerwyn Price, fantastic player, don't get me wrong, but Jonny Clayton equal to him, if not better, in the last 12 months. And I'll take Jonny Clayton at 7s all day long. Peter Wright, I understand the appeal. If he plays anything like he did at the World Championships, he'll be incredibly hard to beat. But this is a short format. We've seen Peter Wright struggle with consistency from tournament to tournament. He definitely raises it for the big tournaments, as does Anderson. So, Clayton, the selection for me. Michael Smith, a similar price, will have his backers, but it wouldn't be for me just because we've only seen it over a short period with Michael Smith, whereas Clayton, we've seen it. He could do it every single tournament. So 7-1, don't mess around. That's the pick for me. And as you've touched on, Luke Humphries, if you're looking for one, a lot of places have cut him to around 33, Luke Humphries. I think that's more where he should be. He's 50-1. He's only 50-1 because he's got to get past Michael van Gerwen, but he can do that. And if he does do that, he's a real live runner in this tournament. And if he's still there in the quarters, I wouldn't want to not be on him, put it that way. So, Luke Humphries, the other selection. I know Smido also gives that one his seal of approval, and he's keen on Rob Cross at 25s for understandable reasons again. So, that wraps up our Masters preview. I hope you enjoyed it. The tournament starts on Friday the 28th, and is quick fire, be over by Sunday the 30th. And I'm sure we will be back to talk about that. We're also going to try and talk about the World Seniors Championship at some point, which is very much on the horizon. Looking forward to that one in a couple of weeks at the Circus Tavern. And we've got the Premier League announcement imminent because that starts next month in a brand new format. So I'm sure all three of us will be back to discuss that. But that wraps us up. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers.